Welcome to Inside Independent Publishing with IBPA. I'm your host, Christopher Locke. I'm also the IBPA Director of Membership and Member Services. Okay, so audiobook sales have been on the rise for many years, and they show no signs of stopping. So many independent publishers are hoping to take advantage of this boom. But there are important factors to consider first. Will the return on investment be worth the cost of producing an audiobook? How do you produce a quality audiobook if you have a lean budget? What genres perform the best as audiobooks? Do you market your audiobooks differently than your print and ebooks? These are a lot of great questions. Podium Entertainment has had a great success in the audiobook market. So Publisher Victoria Gerken joins the podcast today to answer those questions, as well as discuss their transition from being an audiobook-only publisher to now also publishing print and ebooks. Welcome, Victoria. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to talk about my favorite subject, audiobooks and independent authors.
Awesome. Well, so yeah, and y'all have had really great success with that. And I think there's a lot that other publishers can learn from your journey. So I actually want to go all the way back to the beginning and find out, where you started. When was the decision making behind, when you started the company as an audiobook publisher, and, what were you focusing on at that time?
Yeah, so Podium goes back to 2012-ish, 2010, 2012, founded by two Canadian gentlemen, Greg and James, who had an amazing insight into what was happening in the independent ebook publishing market with the arrival of KDP. Kindle Direct Publishing, and the ability of authors to simply publish their books without needing to make a deal with the big five or have an agent or, break through the wall, which had kind of prevented them from reaching their readers. And so with this advent of, a lot of great fiction, including The Martian, which was originally independently published, hitting the ebook market, Greg came at it from a production angle. He had been a sound producer for many years and also a sci-fi lover, and recognized that there were really great stories that could be converted into amazing audiobooks and published effectively and reach a new market. So that was kind of the original insight, and indeed, clearly there was a business there. So I joined Podium in 2016, about 4 years after it began. We had, maybe 500 titles on the market at that point. Very lean team. There were four of us, and I came at it from an acquisition standpoint. I had worked at Random House, Little Random, as well as Knopf, doing publicity and selling subsidiary rights. So I very much brought that author-centered kind of approach to acquiring audiobook rights, working directly with authors to sort of tell them, how Podium could put an amazing audiobook on the market and they wouldn't have to worry about anything. They wouldn't have to pay for anything. And we would take care of all the marketing to an audiobook audience, and they could just keep going and keep writing. So that was sort of how I entered the picture. And then we were acquired by private investors in 2019, and that was really when our trajectory really started to pick up some steam. And since then, we now have 10,000 titles in our catalog, and we will publish 3,100 audiobooks this year, and also our growth into other formats, as you described. So it's been it's really felt sort of like two different kinds of jobs for me, sort of the prior 2019, when we were singly focused on audiobook publishing with a very small team, to now we have nearly 100 people, really fantastic marketing team in LA. Just like our ability to serve authors has just grown by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how much y'all have grown. Seriously, I talk to a lot of our members who are publishers, and they're 5 years in and they're, doing still, maybe 3 or 4 books a year or something. That growth is incredible. So clearly, the vision and initially that works. So I'm interested in, when you were kind of scouring the internet, or, what were the ways when you were, finding these types of books that you thought, oh, this is going to be a good audiobook? What was it about that book that made you go, this is it?
Yeah, well, it's funny, like that, our approach to acquisitions hasn't changed a whole lot in, however long it's been, 13 years. We are looking for authors with a book that is reaching an audience, that is tapping into, a fan base that tells us that there is enough oomph, I guess, technical term, behind it to warrant investing in audiobook production. And you mentioned this in your preamble that, it isn't cheap to make an audiobook, as I'm sure a lot of your members understand. And so looking at an author's record of sales with their ebook on Amazon, so we're looking at the rank, we're looking at the ratings, is this pleasing an audience? It not necessarily me as an acquiring editor. We very much are sort of egoless in terms of our acquisitions. It's not necessarily what I, Victoria, in this space want to read, but like what does the audience want to read? And sometimes those things cross, but primarily we're really focused on what indie authors are finding success within the market. And they're, the incredible success that they've had over the years in genre fiction. So, sci-fi and fantasy were very underserved by traditional publishers. There's maybe one imprint per publisher that is, that's publishing sci-fi. But there's a lot of readers out there. And the same could be said of romance. You think about kind of the romance imprints at a house. It's like, well, how much capacity do they really have to bring enough content to a voracious audience? And that dynamic of kind of supply and demand was really, was served by independent authors and small publishers in a way that, there were hungry readers out there. So, when I hear like, oh, there's nothing to read, or, men don't read or whatever, I'm like, it's because we're not presenting the books that people want to read. And I think that's what we've seen, with the incredible growth, not just of audio, but of like romance, in the romance genre, romantasy. That is a genre that we were very early to pick up on that trend, because we were so close to the independent authors who were publishing in that genre. We saw the success that they were having, and then also just the audiobook sales of romance. I'd say maybe 5 years ago, the romance audiobook market was fairly small. I mean, it wasn't, we were sort of looking at it and thinking, well, what proportion of our list should be romance? And then we sort of followed the market, and it's just exploded. And, more than half of what we do is romance, because the market has increased.
Well, and also I think what's unfair is there's certain genres like romance that people look down upon, and they're like, someone has to say, oh, it's a guilty pleasure. And I'm like, no, if you enjoy it, you're allowed to enjoy it, And I think that some of the bigger houses then were like, oh, that's like below us. We're going to do literary fiction or whatever. But it's like, there are people out there that would just want to read books. They, for many different reasons. So I love that you all embrace that. And clearly you've had a success because you did. Yeah.
I say we're kind of small d democratic. We're supplying. I think also like where the mass market went. I was talking to somebody the other day about the fact that their mother used to have like stacks of like Mills and Boon or Harlequin romances, like stacks that they would share around. And those books were very cheap. They were in the mass market. Maybe you picked them up from a stand at the supermarket, or it was by the checkout. Like that element of the market, I think, has gone to Kindle. But at the same time, the price of, Kindle ebooks is so high that you're not getting those like, $5.99 kind of Harlequin paperbacks. But the independent authors who are writing in that frame, they have tapped that market. So I see it as kind of, it's very much economics as well as like just what people are interested in.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned cost, and that is absolutely something on the mind of any publishers. A lot of them have
Yeah.
budgets that they have to really pick and choose what they spend their money on. So, if we can start, I want to ask, well, what is kind of like, quote unquote, the general cost of doing an audiobook? And that might be harder for you to answer, but is there something that people, can kind of look to and, like, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000, like what's something they can, monitor with that?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the length of the book that you are going to turn into an audiobook. And that may seem so obvious, but, we talk about it all the time. There's been sort of a drive for length and creditworthiness in the Audible ecosphere. So for a long time, the longer the audiobook, the better, because people are looking at it saying, oh, I'm going to get more entertainment for my credit for $15. Like, I'm going to buy this 30-hour audiobook, or am I going to buy this 10-hour audiobook? And often they'd go with the 30 hours, especially in like a fantasy genre. And this is very, very genre focused. You can put a 6-hour romance audiobook out and that will be perfectly normal and perfectly within what the market can bear. But so length has been, a real driver of cost. So I would say, if you're a fantasy publisher, just, watch out, because some of those 200,000 word book books will turn into, that's like 25 hours. So it's about 9,000 words per hour. So in terms of trying to figure out, well, how long is this book going to be in audio? That's the math to do, 9,000 words per hour. So kind of once you've worked back from how long the audiobook is going to be, I would say then it depends on the cost of the narrator. And, they generally are charging at per finished hour rates. That tends to be kind of the industry norm. So instead of being like how long they spend in the studio, they will quote a fee of, okay, it's going to be, I don't know, $250 or something like that, like per finished hour. And so, depending on the rate that a particular narrator can charge, and it really does vary depending on their experience, their popularity, like the demand, again, like it can be, anywhere from, I don't know, 200 to 1,000, like, and more, like there's a big range. So in thinking about casting, you probably want to go with a narrator who has some experience in the particular genre that you might be publishing. So have they got, like, if it's a nonfiction book, does it have graphs? Does it have maps or things that like need to be described? Like, you want to really look for a narrator who has the skills to translate graphs and data and stuff like that in like a nonfiction book. So super basic. Or a romance narrator. Do they have a following in a particular genre? A lot of the narrators are doing a lot of social media. They have a following of their own. You'll see readers will say, I'm going to get, everything Anthony Palmini does, or I want everything R.C. Bray does. Like, that becomes an element that is kind of helpful in casting. So that's a key cost. So you go, and then you've got to add an amount for post-production, not to be ignored, absolutely. Just as you need an editor for a book, you need an editor and a proofer for an audiobook. So that will add, $100 to $150, something like that on top. And so with that basic economics, you can kind of think, my audiobook is going to cost $5,000, something like that. And then you have to say, okay, it's going to be distributed. How much am I going to give up to the distributor, the retailer? Like, what is the royalty that I'm going to receive? And then what am I going to have to pay my author as a publisher? And then you think about the margin. So that is the math route that I think would be the best path to go down, to then say, okay, I'm going to have to sell, I don't know, 5,000 units or whatever to make up the cost, and then can square that against what you think the audience size is for a particular story.
Yeah, I mean, one way that is to determine how many books that are like print or ebooks that you've already sold, to determine, oh, I've sold 3. So spending the money on an audiobook may not be, wise. So can you just tell us, like, in your expert opinion, like, I mean, at what point do you go, okay, this is the right amount of books sold or potential books sold that, yes, I'll probably get a return on investment?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, again, it's an inexact science, right? Because I mean, we see things that sell minimally in like maybe ebook and print, but then has a really big audio audience. But those are kind of outliers. You can correlate, success in ebook and print to audio. So yes, I totally agree with that caveat that you can, depending on the genre as well. Like if it's a particular audio-centric kind of audience, I would say like sci-fi, lit RPG, very popular in audio. Whereas other things like Westerns, interestingly, don't seem to have that big of an audio audience. And I don't really know why, but it does seem to be more of a readership. So we will see things that have sold tremendously well in ebook and print and will not, just haven't seemed to work in audio. So it's sort of a little bit all over the place. But I would say sort of maybe 3 to 1. So you think you'll sell 3 ebooks or books to 1 audiobook. That kind of maybe sizes the market. But yeah, if you're sort of an indie author who is sort of just starting out and saying like, I'm putting it out there, which I applaud, you will, and you've sold, 500 units in ebook, that is going to be kind of small to then warrant spending that much on an audiobook. So my advice in those cases, especially where it's genre fiction and an author is just kind of starting a series, keep publishing, keep growing the series, and see where you end up. Because, you can publish a book 1 into crickets, or not, like that's maybe patronizing to say, but with a book 2, have the book 2 ready to go, and then you get kind of the new release algorithm working for you, and you can really build a series, or potentially not, and then you haven't spent money on an audiobook with a series that is not going to warrant that investment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned a few genres, but I wanted to dig into that because that's something that can help publishers know whether or not, they should do an audiobook. Can you tell us a few more? Like, what are some genres that do really well in audiobook, and what are some that do not do well?
Honestly, I think everything does well in audio. Everything that has an audience, I think, would do well in audio. Now, how you produce it may change. So, for example, if you've got memoir, maybe that warrants having the author read the audiobook, maybe. But there are some very famous people who've had third parties narrate their own memoirs. Britney Spears is a great example of that. So you've got, you just have different approaches. And then also the distribution might be different. So say you've got a podcast or, true crime or something that, might appeal to sort of a podcast crossover audience. Thinking about making sure distribution includes Spotify and Apple, depending on how you can sort of market that podcast audiobook crossover audience. So thinking about it, not just sort of with like a audible lens to say like, oh, everything's sort of got to work on Audible with a certain credit worthiness. If it's shorter, you should also be thinking about, non-Audible platforms that aren't so credit oriented or a la carte oriented, because price is pretty sensitive to people, where you might have like a 2-hour product that somebody isn't necessarily going to spend a credit on unless it's something like hugely popular. So that's, I guess, my my advice on, what kind of deserves an audiobook. I really do think it's at this point in the market, it's everything.
Okay. Well, since you're, an expert in this field, when you hear an audiobook, what do you consider to be a quote unquote great audiobook? What are the elements that make that for you?
I think casting is so important, and that is tricky for independent authors who are wanting to self-publish in audio, because like you wouldn't cast your own movie, say, and so casting a narrator who's going to be able to bring 150 characters to life in say a novel or fantasy book, that is not an easy feat. And so the way we handle that at Podium is we have an amazing casting team of experts some of whom have been narrators or are narrators, and they know the landscape very well. And we have a process of looking at notes from the author. The author is the closest to the work, and so we gather their thoughts about the characters. Do they have a British accent? Do they need a Russian accent? Like what are the elements that we need to think about when we're casting around for talent? So that's another thing I would say to indies who are thinking about going independently to the audiobook realm, is keep track of those issues and those notes. Like as you're writing and as you're doing your editing, think about the text through an audio lens. Watch out for repeated dialogue tags. He said. I mean, that's good advice for just writing in general, to mix it up. But those kinds of things can be very tedious when they get translated into audio. And some authors will have, Microsoft's, text to speech read out the book to them. It's obviously not going to be as good as a human narrator, but it does it calls out, it's just like reading something aloud. You see the challenges in the text, and that's also helpful with editing with an audiobook in mind. So yeah, I would say casting a narrator that brings the text to life is the thing that I look for. Like when I'm listening to an audiobook and you're sort of reacting out loud to the emotion that they're bringing to the work, that's where I'm okay, this is an impressive audiobook.
Yeah, and it can get more expensive if you have more people that are doing certain roles. So how important in terms of entertainment value is it to have, different cast for an audiobook?
I mean, if you have a talented narrator, you don't need a cast of thousands. A narrator will embody each different character and do an amazing job. So I think, and it depends on what people are into, but reviews that I look at the reviews all the time, and I think there's a certain kind of expectation of audiobook listeners that the narrator is just going to, imbue different characters according to what the text requires. So I like a single narration, even in a book that has a million different characters. I mean, I've just seen Audible promoting their new Harry Potter series, which has loads of celebrities and loads of different cast members. I get it. I totally get it. I think that's going to be fantastic. But I also think there's beauty in the simplicity of a single narration. They can be consistent. That's another thing, is really critical in proofing an audiobook, that how a character is characterized in chapter 1 is consistent with chapter 10, and that they don't suddenly have a different voice, and that will make the listener totally come out of the story. It's critical that sort of consistency is maintained across the audiobook. And so, yeah, but we do again, back to romance, oftentimes romance is written from dual points of view. So you've got the girl character and then you've got the guy character, or you've got two guy characters, or whatever you've got. We will have a different narrator of the appropriate gender and character for the different chapters. So we'll do dual, we'll also do duet, which is when, and this is important, I think, in understanding the difference between dual and duet. Duet being there is a one narrator carrying the narrative, but the narrator of the other gender, say it's a romance, so the guy will do all the guy's dialogue. All the male dialogue will be threaded into the audiobook. So that's kind of the difference. Whereas dual could be the female chapter, and the female narrator will be doing the guy's dialogue.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. Yeah. Well, you mentioned the distribution aspect, and I know there's a lot there to talk about, but maybe just for a general overview, like when someone has an audiobook, where can they distribute it? I mean, there's Audible, Streetlib, Kobo, Spotify, Hoopla. I mean, you name it, there's a ton. So like, just generally, like, where can they do it? And then why would they do it in a particular place and not others?
Yeah, I mean, the ACX platform that is Audible's self-publishing platform makes it very easy to distribute on that platform. I mean, that they built that quite a long time ago, and definitely in terms of ease of use. I mean, it's sort of like why you might just publish to Kindle exclusively if you are an indie author and you just want the kind of most straightforward way to reach the market and the biggest part of the market. That is definitely a good solution. There are other. I'm not sure if. So once Findaway was bought by Spotify, I think they continued their Findaway Voices, but there are, and then I think there are other alternatives to get into the wider market. Maybe Authors Republic is possibly an answer. But yeah, it's like reaching beyond Audible does get a little complex. I mean, we as a publisher go direct to the different platforms, so we're not going through an aggregator. But as an independent, you kind of need that sort of help to get to 20 different platforms if that's where you want your audiobook. So that's I would say looking on Facebook groups for independent authors, or you probably have them on your in your feed of suppliers for reaching an audiobook retailer beyond Audible.
Yeah, we have Streetlib as a member benefit. Members get a discount for that one. So, well, thank you for mentioning that. So, obviously you're distributing your audiobook, but then you need to let the world know, hey, it exists. So marketing an audiobook is a whole other thing. And I do know that it can be more difficult than a print book or an ebook. So can you explain why, but then also share, well, what has worked for you all at Podium? I mean, clearly, again, you've had great success.
Yeah, it is. It's a challenging market to hit because there aren't good ad products for direct attribution for audiobook sales, certainly through Audible. You can't it's different from the way the ebook product works, ads product. So you can't say like, I'm going to spend against this and I'm going to know that I'm going to spend X and I'm going to get Y. So just fundamentally that technically doesn't exist. So then you say, okay, well, how do I reach people outside of ads? And certainly Facebook ads have been very effective for us. I think the Facebook audience for a particular genre, I think, is pretty well developed. So from an advertising perspective, that's definitely worked. But then doing sort of basic things like mentioning the audiobook in your front matter in the ebook. So saying like, if you want to, listen along, because of course Audible has the Whisper Sync. So if you buy the Kindle ebook and there's a matching audiobook, you can get the audiobook at a discount. And so some people like that, to be able to put down the ebook and pick up the audiobook depending on what they're doing. So that's, kind of a space that you own, right? You own the real estate in your ebook. And so putting an ad in for the audiobook, or just as you might, add upsell to a next book in series, reminding people that the audio product is out there is not a bad idea. Instagram as well has been really good for us, but we've spent a long time building our direct audience. But then we also, we enable our authors to reach their fans with audio content. So we know that most fans of an author, most readers, are not looking at who their publisher is. They're not saying, that I'm going to go onto Podium's channels. I mean, we've built our own channels, yes, but most people are going to the author's channels. So, like picking clips that are again, I'm going to go back to romance, like romance all the way over here, but like, particularly spicy bits or clips that you think are going to connect with particular fan base. You can get those, clipped out of the audio. The narrators will probably help, or doing something, that's a trailer, or like getting some extra audio from the narrator while they're working on the book and just saying, hey, can you record this for me, just to say like, hey, my audiobook is coming, stuff like that, like ideas that bring the audio, the narrator's voice like into the advertising, is another idea. We do trailers and animated cover arts, again, to like just engage people who are flipping through social media, to stop and be interested in content that we're putting out on our socials, but also the socials of our authors. We hire influencers, bookstagrammers, TikTokers, those kind of influencers that are particularly powerful in a particular genre. And we've used YouTubers. We did a partnership with a YouTuber who does like paintballing for a sci-fi book that we have. So finding somebody that there is a connection between like that audience that they are reaching and the audience that you are attempting to reach, is like, that's what we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that idea of setting up your author for success with providing them with materials so they can then reach their audience. I mean, are these clips like a minute long or 2 minutes or something like that?
Oh, no, shorter than that.
Oh, wow.
If you think about like people's attention span, it's about, 20 seconds max.
Okay.
Yeah, it's different from like, the preview that you'd have on Audible, say, where you listen to the preview, that's like 5 minutes. But yeah, something much snappier, that will I think 15 to 30 seconds is probably the max.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can tell. I mean, you mentioned Facebook, and Instagram. IBPA does have a benefit for Ingram ID where you can do 10% discount on Facebook, Instagram, and Google advertising. So people should check that out. Awesome. So, I wanted to ask then. AI is a question that IBPA, we get asked that a lot now. That's just kind of blown up, and in terms of being like an audiobook, like first company, and now of course you do print and ebooks. I'm just wondering, like, are there tools that you all are using with AI that are actually helpful to your business?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tools part of it is, to me, the most optimistic. That's what makes me most optimistic about AI in general. Just as again, it's in different tools that exist already. You think about Photoshop, that Photoshop has had generative fill for quite a while. And so you just think about like, what are the add-ons in other parts of the business that of tools that we use already that are being enhanced with AI, whether it's Gemini or there are bits of AI now pretty much in everything, every tool. But in terms of, applying that to our audiobooks, I just think that what our listeners and what our authors expect is of top quality human narration that is what delivers the best. And I can see a world where AI makes sense in an audiobook where you've got like an index or something. Just think about like the most boring parts of a book, right? And you go, okay, I could see that. That makes sense. You're delivering something that you wouldn't necessarily, you might skip it, honestly, or notes, like we don't do a lot of nonfiction, but like where you've got a nonfiction publisher, which has like, I don't know, 40 pages of notes and references at the end of the book. Like, is that content that a publisher would necessarily have produced? Like, would it make commercial sense to produce it in the past? Well, I think it's a service to the listener to have all that content. But if it doesn't make commercial sense to actually produce it, well, then maybe that's a place for AI voice. That, to me, which again, we don't do a lot of nonfiction, but just in terms of like me trying to think about with an open mind where the opportunities are, I could definitely see that. But yeah, I mean, how we're thinking about AI is like, how does it make us more efficient? Are there ways to, not proof as in copy edit, but like proof, making sure that like all the widows and orphans in a book are appropriately in place, like things like, jobs like that, make us more efficient, is all that I would say about it.
Yeah, because I do know that the AI narration, obviously, there are voice actors out there who are incredible, and they're artists at what they do, and the last thing we want is for them to lose their jobs. But I know that to save money, some people have reached out to us, some publishers or authors or whatever, saying, "Oh, I want to do an audiobook. That seems like a way to save money." And I mean, personally, like, it seems odd to think that some robot or some computer generated program is going to be able to capture human emotion. I don't know. Maybe they're really amazing, but how does it know that a scene's supposed to be sad or whatever? So anyway, I'm
sure, technology is moving at the speed of, I don't know, more than light at the moment. But I think, I don't know, I find even listening to very, very short clips, like on YouTube, where something has been voiced over by using, you can tell, like AI, I can't listen to it for more than about 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I can't, you got to stop. So I think, where somebody's thinking, because of, economic constraints, that this is an answer. This is, getting your audiobook out there for accessibility purposes. Like, if the economics don't warrant having a human narrator, then there's no shame in that. There's thousands and thousands of virtual voice narrated audiobooks on Audible right now. I would say, though, if this is a book that, you spent a lot of time writing and you poured your heart and soul into, then I think partnering with a narrator who also has a heart and a soul is worth waiting for, or not necessarily compromising like right out of the gate and feeling like I've got to have an audiobook, but I don't know what my market's going to be, so I'm just going to do virtual voice. That me, I see some things like that happen, and I'm like, we would have made an offer, like we would have come and made you an offer for audiobook rights and published this, but you've now got a virtual voice title on the market and there's nothing that we can do. So I would urge patience with an independent author who's just sort of wanting to put something out on the market but feels intense pressure to have an audio edition, and therefore makes that decision. I would just hang on a minute and see if you can sort of make a market with the story, and then have an audiobook publisher come and invest in it for you if you don't have the resources.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, I do want to ask you, so if there are authors out there listening to this and they're like, Podium Entertainment seems like a great fit, like what should they do to reach out to you all for their print book, ebook, or if they already have that, to do the audiobook version?
Yeah, so we have on our website, podiumentertainment.com, if you're an author, there's an option to say work with us. And then there's a form, and it's like, give us a bit of information and send us a link to the title. Usually we want to see an ebook on the market, especially if it's an author who doesn't have a track record. It's somebody, if it's your first book, we want to kind of see how it's working. So that's the way to reach us. But we are very active in outward facing searching. And so oftentimes we will find authors, and sometimes they might not know who we are and might think we're spammers or scammers or something. So put us on the nice list, and make yourself findable. That's the other thing we have when we're reaching out to some authors. It's pretty hard to find an email address, which I know opens you up for scammers by adding an email address to your work. But somehow, if you have a contact me form on your website, check the emails, because there may be something from an audio publisher there wanting to partner with you. So just making yourself available to inbound interest, I think, is also not a bad idea.
Yeah. And like you said, obviously I'm an author myself. I get emails all the time from weird, they're like, hey, we're going to sell your book. And I'm like, okay, like everyone out there really thinks I have the best books ever. So do your due diligence, make sure that, you're not just giving them whatever your bank account number, but obviously there are amazing companies out there like Podium Entertainment that are actually seeking, you are going out there seeking out that next potential great audiobook that's going to do well. So yes, keep your eyes open for that. And I do think that's a good idea for people to make sure that they're easy to be, contactable. Like it's easy. So you know what? I had all these questions for you about your transition from audio to print and ebook, but your answers for the audiobook were so great. I mean, I really appreciate your time. You all have been very successful. Again, I talked to a lot of indie publishers who are doing excellent, amazing work, but their output isn't as much, and you all clearly have quite the output. So, thank you so much for all of this information. I don't know if there's any kind of last words you wanted to say in terms of, people wanting to create great audiobooks, advice, or even just general advice about things that work for you with publishing. But I really, really appreciate your time.
Well, I will come back another time and talk about the book books, the book books as well as the audiobooks. Yeah, I mean, I just I've been so impressed with independent authors who I have worked with now for nearly a decade at Podium. I just find their entrepreneurialism and ability to, be so close to the readers that in a way that publishers, we're at a remove. And so that's what I mainly just love about working directly with authors is it's a collaboration, but we're also learning from each other. Like I've learned so much from the authors that we've published over the years that I can then hopefully bring to new authors who are kind of just starting out. So that's generally kind of what keeps me going on a daily basis. So just keep on publishing. That's what I would say to the indies.
That's the quote. Keep on publishing.
Publishing.
Well, I want to make sure that everyone checks out Podium Entertainment. It's podiumentertainment.com. A lot of amazing books and audiobooks there. And also, I mentioned a few of the benefits of membership of IBPA. Go to ibpa-online.org to check those out. We hope you become a member. And also check out this podcast last Thursday of every month. YouTube, everywhere you download podcasts. Victoria, very grateful to you. This is excellent information. I learned a lot. Thank you. And also, continued success to you all, really.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.